When you understand what an anxious horse looks like, you also realise that it's not normal, and your thoughts might lead to the next question, well, how do I fix that? Keep listening because Mark is going to talk you through ways to help two horses that carry a lot of anxiety. Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Mark, your speciality is arguably helping horses to cope better in their human environment, i.e. you help them to process things and to feel a bit better about what's out there, which includes us. It's a seriously specialised field and one that many people come to you for, but not everyone can get to your clinic. So this week, you're going to guide us through helping two different horses that need help in this area. Now, your first horse is a horse that has been owned by someone who's had him for 16 months but hasn't done a lot of work with him. She did, however, know that he was completely shut down. So she hasn't ridden him for a long time, over a year. She noticed that he was so shut down, he was fearful of his new environment and anything on the ground under saddle. Now he's a little bit more settled into his new home and he's not so much shut down. But she can see that he's still carrying an awful lot of worry, stress and tension. And in those situations, she will retreat out of his area. Now, it's taken a huge amount of time to get any connection with him, and she's now got that, to the point that if he sees her, he'll whinny and come running to her when he hears her voice. He's very food orientated, almost like a Labrador, and he has been restricted in his eating area. So his owner is taking him to a new paddock each night for grazing, and he relies on her to do that every time. She's been doing it at liberty. Now what she's doing is putting the halter on him, leading him into this new night paddock, even though he was probably there the night before, and then taking him back out, taking his halter off, and just seeing if it go in by himself. Now, it's taking her 2 or 3 leading and unhaltering experiences before he will actually be confident enough to go in by himself. She reasoned that she's now doing that new routine and she's trying to lead and unhalter and give him confidence by thinking more and reacting less. So his reactions can be that his body tightens and stiffens, and sometimes he'll freeze, snort, hyperventilate, he'll have wide eyes, he'll have nostrils, so she notices breathing changes. So she's trying to give him a little bit more confidence so that going into this new paddock isn't so scary. It seems to be working, but she'd like to know, is she using the right approach? And is there anything that she should or shouldn't be doing? So, Mark, it's a wonderful sort of picture that she's given us of this very frightened horse that obviously gets overwhelmed by a lot of things and is quite dependent, it seems, on this new owner. Really likes food. Can you just shed a little bit of light on what sort of you are picturing of a horse in your head? Like what characteristics or red flags can you see at this early stage?
Yeah, well, when anyone buys a horse that's been shut down and sort of worked in a certain environment and they've stopped thinking and searching and processing, it's very it can be very confronting when those horses open up, because you suddenly get a horse that's, it could have aggression, it could have anything towards people. By the sounds of it, you're doing a good job making a connection between you and your horse, and the horse starting to trust you and feel safe with you. The catch is, and this is always the catch, is with any horse that we're going to be dealing with in some form or another. And it doesn't matter how you're dealing with your horse. If it's just a horse you're going to have out in a paddock, it's a horse you're going to ride, is they have to have a certain level of confidence and ability to process the environments they're in and the situations that they're in and could be put through. So, the connection can be very good, but a horse that doesn't have a lot of confidence is going to rely on that connection and rely on you and maybe the food stimulants to give them a good feeling. But when they have to process things on their own, they find it quite difficult. So, and also you've got to look at is what caused the horse to be shut down? What training has he had? all those sorts of things, because a lot of times we're trying to readjust how the horse processes pressure and get them to find good solutions to situations that are a little bit challenging. And even a part of the question there when you said, when he finds it too much, you'll retreat, let him reset a little. Now that's a good thing to do in a sense, but it can be also a negative thing. You felt it's right to retreat and say let him reset a little bit and get a little calmer. But then by retreating, he hasn't found a solution and he hasn't searched. And I think there's two ways to go about it. One thing I would start to do is a lot of horses that are starting to rely on the connection that we've built with them, I'll walk them at a distance. I'll have them, maybe 8 meters away on a rope and walk them, one step at a time through new environments. So they have to process the environment as they're walking through into it. So it doesn't matter where they're going. Could be just from one end of an arena to another. But I've seen horses that'll just follow their owners everywhere, and then all of a sudden when they're let go in that space and the owner leaves, they run around and they're really frightened. So I think just walking at a distance and processing as they're going is super important, not just relying on the nice connection that they have with you.
Can we just go back a step then? So why, before we go into too much training detail, why is this horse or any horses that tend to be shut down, why aren't they processing? What's happened?
Their ability to process gets taken off them. So like a simple scenario, I call it commercial, and it kind of is like there was a commercial style of horsemanship that, had this drive, draw, desensitized kind of, program. And if people weren't intuitive to what their horses were going through, what they were feeling, it was very easy just to sort of get a horse to stand still but feel troubled about it. So an example might be, someone wants to put a saddle on a horse. So they let the horse move its feet away from the saddle blanket. So they just keep sort of, putting the saddle blanket near it until the horse, keeps moving. But then the horse goes, well, that didn't work, I'm going to stop. And then the horse stops. But that horse might have just sort of gone, I'm just going to stop searching and trying and just stand still and go into a learned helplessness state. So the reason they shut down is they have the right to act on their thoughts taken off them. So when you train a horse, you're trying to get them to act on their thoughts, and you're kind of listening to their thoughts and helping them process those things. If you take that off them too quickly, then they just go into a learned helplessness state, and that's what happens with a lot of horses. Is they just sort of they stop searching, they stop thinking, and then when we ride them, what usually happens is to get them to go, people are just kind of pushing them away from pressure, pushing them along with the legs all the time and steering them, but the horse is not really actively searching. It's not going towards its thoughts in a forward thought. It's just kind of moving away from pressure, and then when the pressure goes away, it just stops and says, don't do anything, just don't make a mistake, don't. So when we give them room to think, they get really lost and they can get really troubled about it. But it's all part of the healing process, unfortunately, is we have to bring them out and then show them they can do it.
So the shutting them down, the not letting them think for themselves, making them do things when they're not comfortable with what's happening around them, that changes how they're thinking and how they're processing. Yep. But what's interesting is that when we go away, when we take away all those things, when we're not on their backs, when they're in the paddocks, and when she's just taking this horse out into a pasture, how come they're still not processing? Because we're not putting pressure on them in those situations. How come it's hanging on?
We can only train the horse that we have right there in front of us, and we only know what that horse has gone through with us. If someone doesn't tell us the history of a horse, it's sometimes it's a guess. And when I look at horses, the horses that we have in our own herd and things like that, there's a whole process from being born to being in a herd, to solving little problems in the herd and challenges and stuff like that kind of create an evolution in that horse and then the training evolution is we're trying to train a thinking horse some horses, they might be born, they might be like an example, and it's not all the time, but sometimes, say for instance, people are still weaning horses by taking their mum straight off it and having it in a box. And the horse just goes through a very panicky stage of its life where mum's gone, it's in a box, and very quickly it could have some claustrophobic feelings because it's just remembers this really scary environment, and then it gets low confidence and all that sort of thing. Some horses, they don't live in herds, so they just go from the stable to the food to the water, and there's no challenges. There's no little conflicts in herds and things like that. So they don't know and how to process bigger, broader environments. And bigger and broader environments are like, I'm going to take the horse on a trail ride, and there's going to be other horses, and there's going to be different terrain. There's going to be animals you've never seen before. So depending on their whole life and then how we train them is if they're able to, process little challenges ahead of them. And at the end of the day, there are some horses that even in a herd will kind of let the other horses make the big decisions when there's a problem, and they'll just follow their idea. So when they're out on their own, they go, oh, there's no one here to do that, and I'm not a very confident horse. And if they have had bad weaning, if they've had bad training, then their confidence to process things is really, really low. So they really struggle, and that's why they connect sometimes to their owners really well, because they almost want to hand over the trouble and say, you just take it on board. And so when we put them on their own, they get super separation anxiety.
So she's right then with her assessment that this horse has got low confidence.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
okay.
sure, yeah.
And so let's go back to the training. What was one of the things that she can do? Because remember, with this question has come from Cheryl, and Cheryl, Mark, is all about helping your horse to improve, not just improve its confidence, but to be able to think and sort of help it come out of the shutdown state. So we need to be quite active in what we're doing. So let's hit over some ideas, Mark.
Okay, so the biggest thing is, first of all, he does have to solve problems and deal with pressure. And that's a tough one. I can't just give you the answer over a podcast, but basically sometimes, you might be giving him space to come out of his shell, but I think if he was under pressure, he'd get quite fragile and maybe go back into his shell or get a bit panicky. So you have to sort of figure out, how can I help him find a good solution under certain amounts of pressure? So situations like, how you train him is going to be, okay, when I guide him, has he been chased? Has he been shut down in a way where he's been, what I mean is shut down, he is shut down, you've already said that, but has he been flooded? So when you add more stimulant, he just goes very still and quiet and doesn't do anything. So the biggest thing I would do in my education, I would put some feel on him in some way, whether it be leading pressure or something like that. And I would stay in with that feel until I see him searching and thinking and looking for a solution, not just looking at you, looking at the pressure and not knowing what to do. So searching when you're trying to train him is very important. The other thing I'd also do is I do a lot of work where he's at a distance from me. So, you've probably, people have seen me do lessons where I get a horse to lead out ahead and process the environment, and I follow. That's super important. But sometimes the basic lesson we can do with the horses, we'll walk ahead of them, but they'll be 8 meters away. So you get him to lead up one step at a time on a rope, so he really understands that rope, that he can stop with the rope, lead a few steps with the rope, stop with the rope, and so forth. And then you can walk through different environments and he's at a distance away from you. So instead of kind of relying on him just connecting to you and him just going, oh, I'm just going to put the tunnel vision on and just walk behind my owner and she's going to make me feel safe, he has to process the environment on his own a little bit because he's at a distance from you. And I think it's really good for those horses to start to be connected with us at a distance, but it's enough of a distance that they're not kind of just following us and avoiding everything else. So you have to sort of make situations where he's not avoiding his environment as he's thinking and working and things like that. But yeah, the biggest thing is when you ask a question of him in your groundwork or anything, he's not just moving away from a pressure. And most of these horses that are shut down are just being taught to move away from the legs, just go that way with the reins, but they're not actually thinking and processing things like that. So, and that's really, really important that they do that. The other thing I'd really look at too is I'd walk up to him in a hurry, like there's a bushfire and you're really hasty and you've got to run over to him and chuck the halter on him and lead him out of a bushfire, and see if he doesn't cope with that. If he doesn't cope with that, then basically every time you back off and you sort of give him time to process, probably half the reason he's worried is because of just human energy approaching him, and that could have been in his past training. He might have been taught to be worried about energy. So if you have to back off and retreat to get him to relax and process, then it sounds to me like there's a problem in the way he sees you. So if you stay calm and kind and listen to him, he's going to trust you, but he's not going to trust anybody else because you've had to withdraw a little to get him to come out of his shell and become a bit more confident. So some of that could be he's frightened of energy. So maybe set it up so you can walk up to him with energy, touch and go, leave him alone and do it again. So eventually he goes, oh, I'm not even frightened of you when you jog to me. That's because you like me and I trust that. And that will also help his confidence around you and other people. So then he's got a bit more brave in him in those environments where there's more people and things going on.
We've got some good content on that on the online training videos. Cheryl, so you can see that. We've got some more content coming out this month too, actually, where Mark was helping a specific horse with just that. And a change in that horse was really impressive over the course of the clinic. So that's a heads up for you that's coming through. So with what she's doing with leading the horse in and out of the paddock and then letting him choose to go in by himself, is that okay? Is that still going to be helpful?
It is. The unfortunate and the most difficult thing is he still is not in the right mindset, and through education he hasn't had enough education to help him learn to process and more challenges and be in the right mindset. So just at the last clinic, there was a horse that was really stressed, and obviously she got used to the clinic, but actually she was the last one at the clinic when everyone left. But she'd made such a change in her mindset. She was the one that was pacing the fences, looking for the other horses. Everybody left, and I looked out in the paddock, and she's just standing there quietly. But over the duration of the clinic, from the education, getting her to process better, she could deal with things a whole lot better, and environmental change and things like that. And even when the horses left, and another horse at the same clinic had the same thing, the owner said that, he usually, paces as soon as the neighbour gets taken away. It doesn't matter if it's a clinic or at home. But as he started to become a lot more confident, when they took another horse out of the paddock that was near him, he would whinny and then he'd go, just go back to about his business and be calm. So, the good education and the confidence building will help the horse process the new paddock. Obviously, graded exposure, leading him around the paddock yourself, but at a distance, get him to search, come back to you, go out, search, come back to you. So he's done it with you, but you slowly wean yourself off him will also help him a little bit process that paddock, because not all horses are designed to do everything on their own, and that little bit of help will help him. But as long as he's not just walking around the paddock totally reliant on you.
So getting things back into that leading and using that lead rope and using that connection, but letting him to sort of get the idea of carrying himself forward and searching. Let's go on to the next horse. It's a question that's come from Laurie. She's got a 14-year-old off the track standardbred mare who spent only a couple of years on the track, and then she was sort of put into a breeding farm for a few years. She's been with Laurie now for 2.5 weeks. Laurie is really at a loss as to what to do with her. So she doesn't sort of have, she's a very sweet, personable mare, no sort of major issues, but she can see that she's got issues processing things that concern her. So she's given a few examples. I'll just run them through very quickly. She'll get anxious and tight when she leaves her up to run into her shed to get her feed in the evenings. But in the morning, she's standing there calm, eating her hay as if nothing's happened. So, and then another time she might be snorting around near that shed again. So given the option, she'll stand in that shed the majority of the time. She'll only leave to get a drink. She's watched her go to leave, but then something moved outside of the shed, so she went straight back into the shed. She's seen her grazing next to a pallet, seemed absolutely fine with it, but the next time she got anxious over a plastic bag that was hanging on a gate near to that pallet. So she can also become quite reactive. She gets anxious, she gets unsettled. Laurie's just not sure about what she needs to do to help her to get her to process her anxiety. She has noticed that she sniffs an awful lot of things. She wasn't sure whether she was taught that, but she has sent a video through, and you can see that she goes to sort of smell different things on the ground. She might smell them numerous times, but then she might see them although she's smelt them and processed them, she can see them at another time and be quite reactive towards them. She'd just like some ideas, Mark, on how she can help this mare and sort of address this obvious anxiety that she carries.
Yeah, 14 years old and she's had a tough life. These scenarios are never quite an easy scenario. It's to answer the question is actually quite a tough answer, because I have a feeling that if I saw her and work with her, I'd see her process my information in not the way that I would think is helpful for her. So, I would be working on a whole bunch of things, and that is opening her up to searching and processing and being out of a state of freeze in the time that I'm working with her. Because a lot of these horses, I've seen too many scenarios now of horses that have, been weaned in a certain way, been in the training system in a certain way that's caused them to be very fragile, very frozen, not able to process a lot of things, horses. So I'd be looking at how she processes the information that we present to her first, because I have had a lot of success with getting horses out of a state of freeze and them starting to hold and retain that as they go back out in the paddock and they become more comfortable. So otherwise, you're really going, what am I going to do? Go stay with her out in the paddock and help her do this for 24 hours a day. So going back to the training platform, I'd be firstly looking at, and when you do something, like I think for everybody, say, well, how do you take a horse out of freeze, get them curious and interested? One thing that everybody commonly wants to work on is the connection and the horse reaching out to us and sniffing on us and trusting us. And that's super important when you're going to work your horse. But it's how they and what they do when they're frozen and under pressure. And so basically, if they're feeling a bit stressed one day because a couple of things happened, then the pallets become scary. But when they're not as stressed, the pallets, they can process them, So like someone asked me the same question just at the last clinic. It was, how can a horse see something one day how can it go in the horse float or the horse trailer, for people who call it trailers, one day, and then at the end of a clinic or something like that, it doesn't go on. I said, well, when I don't feel threatened, I can stand in a corner. But when I feel threatened, there's no way I'm going to stand in a corner, because especially if there's, people who are threatening me around me, I'll be in an open space. I don't want to be backed into a corner. So a horse won't go into a claustrophobic environment when it's feeling threatened or its anxiety's up in a certain way, because that is just a stupid thing for an animal to do, to put itself in a box when it starts to feel it's scared for its life or something like that. So basically, when it's not scared for its life, it'll go into a box and go, well, I don't feel threatened, so I'm a bit curious and I'll go in there. So, and that's the same with anything. Like, there could be something that scares a horse, but it just depends how much anxiety that went through the night or going up there, or memory in a certain pattern that's just happened that makes the horse scared of something randomly. And just because they sniff things, it doesn't mean they process things. Horses, they're like people. I don't how many people get distracted on Instagram and Facebook or whatever they're on these days and go, what have I just done for the last half hour? People think horses, these sentinel beings, and they're, amazing, and they are. But I've seen horses go off sniffing all sorts of things, and they're just off with the fairies sniffing, and they're just smelling the smells that are right in front of them right there. And they're not actually really processing the environment or anything. They're just going, oh, that's a smell. That smells like another horse. Oh, that's another horse's urine. Oh, I can smell that. Oh, that's hay. I'd say there's been hay here before. And then all of a sudden someone will clap and the horse will get a big spook. Well, it was just off. Like, so that smelling was just someone off watching Instagram videos, getting lost in that, not really processing what's around them. So you've got to think that they also do that. And sniffing may look like they're processing, but it doesn't necessarily. It's just, oh, I can smell something. So we have to take that on board. Same with food. Horses that stress eat. Oh, I'm eating food. I just like that, but I'm going to just block everything else out and I'm going to stress eat. So. They can. That's why sometimes food's a dangerous thing around anxiety, is because a horse will start to stress eat, just like a person will go and have, chocolate or alcohol or whatever when they're stressed. It's like, I'll deal with it with that instead of figure out what the problem is.
So the sniffing that she's doing could actually be her trying to avoid having to do other things like process.
She just might have noticed a smell in there that day, or she might be genuinely sniffing it, and it's I just can't say. It could be a healthy sniff that's really getting at a process, but as I say, when she's curious, she'll sniff. When she's nervous, it's still a threat. So sometimes horses will sniff a threat, but when they're more threatened, they won't go and sniff the threat. They want to be away from it. So it doesn't mean she's fully processed those scary things. It means that particular day she's got a little bit more open. She's more open, more confident, because there's certain prerequisites that haven't happened to make her nervous, or things that have happened prior to that. So she's got enough room in her to cope with that. The worry cup is not as full, so she can cope with being a bit curious about something she's scared of. And that's usually what happens with a lot of horses. But going back to the sort of training side of it is, you really got to get them to, when I pick up on a rope on a horse and I put it to the side, say if I just want to lead a horse out around me, for a horse like her, you want to see her look away and search into that environment, not just look at you and the pressure and just go like a robot. And a lot of the standies I meet, they've been taught to go in, stand really still when they get harnessed up, and then they go brrr, and their mind goes 100 miles an hour as soon as they move in that cart and they're out on the racetrack. They're kind of like, and it's just a frantic sort of thing. So they just they'll go really still and not process, and they'll shut down, and then all of a sudden they'll go on overload. So, when you work them, it's so important that you're watching that adjustability of the mind. So, and anyone that's got horses like this, if your horse is staring off into the distance, try and interrupt it. If you can't interrupt it. Whatever you need to do, like bang your leg, take a flag, but interrupt that horse's thought. Then when you've interrupted it, let it have that thought back again, and then try and interrupt it again. You're not trying to get the horse completely hyper-focused on you, but otherwise then that's just another uninterruptible thought. And going back to connection, some horses just focus on their owners, and they're actually still not, their mind's not in a state of flow where they're thinking left, thinking right, what's over there, what's here. So what I'd look in your horses, how interruptible and how flowy are her thoughts? Does she look over there when you ask her to look over there with the rope? And then when you say you've looked over there and look back over here, does she look back over there? If she gets a fixation, can you say, let go of that? And then if she can, well, obviously it won't be a fixation. If it was a fixation, she won't let go of it. But if you do see that fixation, it's essential you get them to let go of it. So basically you just interrupt a thought, they'll take on a new thought. Leave them have that for a bit, interrupt that, they'll take on a new thought until you see a brain that's moving around. And then when you see that brain moving around and those thoughts moving around, then you can guide those thoughts, and you can guide them into looking into an environment that might challenge them and things like that, not just avoiding it, not thinking somewhere else and hyper-focusing on it. Like, how many people have a horse that hyper-focuses on safety and never actually looks off to where you want them to go? They're just always wanting to go back to the gate.
So with this mare, it's not about changing her environment, limiting or giving her full access to that shed, nothing like that. It all comes down to education again. So presumably on the ground, back with the halter, back with the lead rope. and let's see where her thoughts are and see if we can manipulate those thoughts and get them flexible so that then she can learn that she can think in different areas. And that's all going to help her to open up and process.
And once she is mobile in her thoughts, and then you teach her to problem solve. So, you know, obstacles, anything like that, you know, when they're thinking and they're sniffing and they're adjustable and they're not frightened of the pressure. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of work you're going to do is getting them not frightened of a lead rope and a holder on her head and the pressure of that. You know, that we have to do so much work in them not trusting the things that we're providing, like, you know, the pressure that we're providing and the feel and guidance we're providing. And a lot of horses don't even trust that. So, so when she's mobile in her thoughts and she trusts your guiding pressure, then you guide her to things that trouble her and help her process those things so she gets better at problem solving and things like that. And then, you know, you can lead her in, like I've done a podcast years ago. Someone asked me, it was a talk over on a video, and they said, the horse doesn't like the stable. I said, well, did you treat the stable like a horse float or a horse trailer? And they went, I said, yeah, no, teach that horse to lead into that as if you're gonna sort of use that to cart it for 5 hours in, you know, and so because the horse would go in and out, but they never treated it as this is a really scary place, and I've got to treat it like loading into a really scary horse float, backwards and forwards, in and out, process the whole thing, move around in the whole thing softly, and get them to really process being inside that stable. And when they sort of thought of that and did that, they went, that really worked. The horse is good in the stable now. I said, well, you would have had to do that in a float. So what's the difference with the stable?
Wow. And that video is actually on the online videos as well. So Mark, while you've been talking, you know, you've been shedding a whole load of light on how we can really help these horses that have been put into this highly anxious state, and they carry that anxiety with them. It affects how they behave in the paddock with the herd. It's sad to hear it, but it is incredibly common, especially horses that have had a lot of education, because they've been put in environments where they've had a lot of pressure as well, and it's pressure they haven't understood. So it's wonderful to hear that you can help them, and of course, you know, how you do that is fascinating. If you want to see Mark live in action, he's going to the States next week for quite a few weeks. So I'm just going to quickly give you the rundown if you're over there. So Oaks should be in Florida, 3rd to the 6th of May. Shelby, Kentucky, 9th to the 12th of May. Rochester, Minnesota, that's 15th to the 18th of May. Redmond in Oregon, 22nd to the 25th of May. Driggs in Idaho, 28th of May to the 1st of June. And then he's presenting at the Western States Horse Expo, 6th to the 8th of June. If you can get to that event, it is fantastic, and it's very orientated towards helping horses. So there's a huge amount to learn from these shows, as you know. But he will be there every single day, presenting twice a day. So do go along and see him. And if you can get to any of the clinics, you're most welcome to come and fence it, audit, and see how Mark is making these changes on the horses. So we'll leave it there for this week. But thank you, Mark, for your incredible insights as ever. And we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, everybody.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like it, share it, or send us a comment. It all helps in reaching new ears and helping more horses. And if making a change in your horse appeals to you, Mark offers his direct support and a diverse learning platform. Head to marklangley.com.au and grab your 7-day free trial.